Hey guys, today's for the install bay. We're going to take you through the steps necessary to install a radio in a car. Just so happens today to be a Prius.
Stay tuned.
So before we put a radio in any car, we go to bestkits.com to check and find out what parts it's going to need. There you can enter the make, model, year of your car, and you'll see a list of parts that are required. Show you the dash kits, a smart harness if required, a USB integration if it's available, a basic wiring harness if it has the base model stereo, antenna adapters, as well as if you're going to replace the speakers, speaker adapter pods so that you can bolt them in. Now, the one thing not listed here is if you have a factory backup camera. That's going to be part of the smart harness, and for that you'll want to go to the link for the particular smart harness. Here you get a brief description of the smart harness, cars that it's good for, but mainly technical documents. You can go here and click on and download the document that comes with the unit. Here you can pre-download the installation document for your particular harness. It'll go through and tell you all the things you're going to need to know for your particular vehicle, if there's any special notes, how to reprogram the steering wheel controls, and any parts that may be required to do your particular install that aren't included in the kit. It'll also show you how to take care of any updates that need to be done on the module. Now before we start every car, that's where we start. If Best Kits doesn't have it, we move on to Metra. And if Metra doesn't have it, then we scour the internet to see if anyone else has ever done an install, if there's a kit from a third party of unknown origin that we can pick up, or if we're just going to have to make the kit ourselves, which happens sometimes. In this case, we have a good idea of what we need. We picked up a BAA44 antenna adapter. We have the USB TY1 USB retention cable. Now they do make a TY2 also, and that's a problem for some installations because some installs will call for a TY1 and it actually needs a TY2. Sometimes the databases aren't 100%, so it's good to remove the radio beforehand, get an idea of what the harnesses look like, and then go ahead and pick up what you need. If you have a local shop that you can go to, it's always nice to just, hey, can I just see if this fits in my car? For this case, we're going to need the CAM TY11. There again, there's also a CAM TY12. So different cars need different harnesses, and sometimes they get it wrong. So, same thing. We have the dash kit. In this case, it's a BKTOYK953. Gotta love model numbers. And of course, my favorite harness of all, which is the RP4.2 TY11. This will allow us to retain the steering wheel controls, if it has the factory amplified system or non-amplified system. Give us the triggers we need to retain the backup camera, so the reverse is in this. Basically everything that you would need, you don't have to go find. It's built into the harness, which is nice. We'll show you how to wire this up. And so now let's go take a look at Fernando. He's taking the radio out of the dash, and we can see what the harnesses look like.
So first thing, we're gonna start pulling the dash apart. After you taking it off everything, don't forget to plug it back in, this piece, so you don't have the hybrid warning light.
So you've already gotten the radio out of the dash. So I'll tell you what, I'll trade you the wiring harness and you can give me the radio. I'll put this on the bench. So this particular harness, it has a lot of extra wires. We like to go ahead and plug it in and mark the ones we're going to keep and not mark the ones we're going to remove. Get the camera plug in.
Oh, this is the camera?
No, the camera's in your lap.
Camera's in. Yep.
Alright, well I'll trade you those for the USB and the antenna adapter. Let's make sure those fit.
Yep. I can keep the USB.
You can keep the USB. So we've gone ahead and tested all our harnesses, and in this particular case, all the harnesses they recommend were 100% accurate. Like we said earlier, that's not always the case. So don't freak out if you accidentally get the wrong one. There's a lot of cars on the road, and sometimes they don't get them 100% correct. 97% of the time, they're right on the money, so that's a good thing. Now, Fernando's going to go ahead and start working on retaining or adding in the Bluetooth mic. I'm going to take these over to the bench and start cleaning these things up. So the brain that comes with the RP 4.2 has these cool dip switches on the side. And these dip switches correspond to the steering wheel controls and that what brand steering wheel controls you're going to use. So on page 2, they have this guy right here in the middle. And you want to go ahead and flick the dip switches corresponding to your radio. Then we'll go ahead and take a little piece of tape and we'll cover the dip switches because they're dip switches and we don't want them to get knocked while they're in the dash, just in case, you know, you get the idea. So now this is pretty much ready to go. Let's move on to the wiring harness. Now this was the antenna adapter. It has a blue wire on it. This blue wire is going to be the power antenna feed. In the harness, it has the auxiliary, so we're able to retain the factory auxiliary. So it has all these harnesses here. And the ones with the marks were the ones that Fernando said we're going to be using. The ones without the marks, these guys here, we're not going to be using. This is up to you. I don't like to put these in the car. I like to remove these. So we're going to go ahead and rebuild this harness without these two in it. Now I will tell you this, it is a monumental task. It's a pain to do what we're going to do. So if you're not up for the challenge, definitely don't do it. But hey, it's nothing but time, baby. So we also have the camera retention cable. Now this does a couple different things. It's not made just to work with this. It's also made as a male and female input so that if you want to add, let's say you already have an existing factory backup camera and you'd like to add maybe a front facing camera, or you don't have the camera at all, this is all designed to plug in and retain anything else that's plugged into it. So you can actually add a backup camera to the factory radio. Now we're going to go ahead and remove this particular harness here because we don't need it. Also on here you'll notice there's a red and a ground. The red has a flag that says supply for 6 volts. And it comes with this cool instruction here. Now what this instruction does is it tells us where to plug this in to this harness so that we can have the 6-volt output out of this brain here. So we won't need to add in a 12 to 6 volt converter. It's all built into the brain. So once we get to that, we'll take a look at it. So let's go ahead and start cutting things up. Now just in case you're wondering, this is a Delphi and that's the part number. This is a pin removal tool, one of many we use. So one thing to know when removing all of these, I like to save all these because there's certain harnesses that don't have pins for like steering wheel controls or aux or something like that. So I always save these. I have a box full of them just in case we need them for something else at a later date. So it's always nice to just, you know, if you're going to depin them, save them. Now when you're looking at a mess of wire like this and you're just like, oh my god, where do I start? Yes, it can be foreboding. I always just start with the speaker wires and just kind of work my way around. Now this pin tool, this is a Matco. It's just a Matco pin tool. I have no idea what the part number is. Now, there's a couple wires that may or may not be in the car or may not need to get hooked up. Specifically these blue ones, there's some pink ones, some red and white ones. So what we're gonna do is as we come across those, we're gonna stop what we're doing, we're gonna take them over to the car, we're gonna plug them in and see if they're required. This is always helpful to do when you're going through this. I mean, you could sit in the car and do what we're doing. It makes life a little easier. Obviously, we're not gonna do that if we're gonna solder the things back together. But, you know we have an amplified antenna here, so chances are good we're not going to need these wires. And of course, we don't want to go through the heartache of trying to relocate them all if we're not going to use them. So we're going to stop, take this into the car, and see if we need them. Hi. Bye.
So in this car, it's really tight under the dash to put the GPS antenna. So what we do is take the A pillar and put the GPS antenna for the Kenwood on that corner. So let's go do that.
Now these three long wires here are another one to check. Basically what you have is the light green, which is the analog parking wire. You have the pink, which is an analog vehicle VSS wire. And you have the violet white, which is the reverse trigger. Now the reason why I say analog is because over here on the harness that plugs in is a whole nother version of them, just in the digital sense. So if the car doesn't actually have an analog, here are the digital versions. So we want to check those wires also. Let's go back. So it does have an analog reverse wire, but it does not have the vehicle speed sense or the parking brake, which we're not going to need anyways, so we're going to go ahead and remove those. So now we have all our plugs that we don't need removed. We're going to go ahead and clean up all these connectors here that we just cut. So now you want to grab your camera instructions, and it's going to, on the end of the red wire, you'll notice there's a little pin that's going to plug into the harness. you're going to want to plug it into the bottom, the fifth one over from this side here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go ahead and plug that bad boy in. And then give it a little tugging. Now what that'll do is that's going to provide 6 volts to power up the factory camera. Alright, so before you ask, this is called tesa tape. T-E-S-A. This is the felt interior tape that we're using here. We have it in 2 different sizes. It's the same stuff. It's what the factory uses to cover all their wiring harnesses.
We have the GPS antenna, the 2 USBs. Of course, we retain the factory USB. Dean is finished the backup camera and the aux, so we're ready to go.
Now on the bottom of the radio, right here on this end, it says non-amplified audio output and amplified audio output. So if you don't have the JBL system, you're going to want to use the non-amplified audio output. Now if you get this wrong, you'll just have no sound. So now we have at least half of it done. We have the car side done. Now we've tightened these all up so that they're all nice and pretty. This one, the camera plug, I like to leave loose because it's pretty short and it's going to have to plug into the radio and the car, so you know it's going to have to be moved, so we'll leave this one free. These are going to have to connect to the other side, which is what these plugs are for, which is the radio side. So that's this harness here. So let's go ahead and open this bad boy up and take a look at it. There's a brown loop. That's not going to be used, you just leave it alone. You have the purple white, which is the digital reverse wire. We're not going to need that because this has an analog one. Then you have the pink and green, which is these two here, the pink and green, which are the emergency brake and the VSS. If you need to use those 2 wires for whatever reason, VSS, honestly, even though Pioneer has a VSS wire, I would never use it. It doesn't need it. It's a throwback. Anyways, so you're definitely not going to need that. But if you want to use the emergency brake because you don't need access to the menu system all the time, just when the emergency brake is engaged, go ahead and retain this and hook that up to the radio's light green wire. Otherwise, if you're going to do a bypass, you won't need either one of these. Now you will see a blue-white. That is going to be the amp turn on. Now, even though this doesn't have an amp that we've already seen, the blue-white wire always gets hooked up by default, whether it needs it or not. PAC likes to use that a lot of the times to wake up the module, to reset it. So always just hook the blue-white wire up, whether there's a factory amplifier or not. It's just the safest thing to do whenever you're doing one of these smart harnesses. Now this also has a brown wire in it along with the brown loop. It's not listed as anything, so we're just going to leave it alone. Then you have these guys here. This is the steering wheel control. You have 2. You have the blue-orange, which is going to be for JVC Kenwood, like we're doing today. We're doing a Kenwood, so we're going to need this. And then you have the 1/8 inch down here. This is going to be for pretty much everyone else. Pioneer, Alpine, Sony. They all use this style connector. We're not going to need it for this install. So we'll just leave it capped off. We'll go ahead and pull that and we'll zip tie it up in the harness. Or you can just remove it if you want. That's entirely up to you. Next we have the orange-white. This is going to be illumination. This is what's going to dim when the lights turn on so that your radio will go into nighttime drive mode. Then we have our whites, our greens, our purples, and our grays. And these are all your speaker wires. Now, what's left over from here are the yellow, the red, the black, and the purple-white, which is reverse. So we also have to hook these up as well. And don't forget, we also have the blue, which is the power antenna wire. Now, a lot of manufacturers have foregone the power antenna wire. I mean, they just don't provide it anymore. And if that's the case, connect it to the red wire. You basically just need this to power on and off with the car, which is what the red wire will do. I don't like to hook it up to the amp turn on, the blue-white wire, because sometimes this draws more current than that can provide, and it can be bad for the radio. If you want to add a relay, you can do that as well. That's entirely up to you. The Kenwood harness actually has a blue-white, and a blue wire in it, so we're going to hook it up the way it's supposed to be. just in case you were wondering, the heat gun we use for this is a power probe micro torch. Now one last thing before we wrap this up are these guys right here. This is the factory auxiliary that plugs into the radio. Now not all radios have an RCA input. Most of them have an aux jack. Now what we do is we get this guy here. This is just from Amazon. It's a female RCA to aux jack. I'll put a link to it in the show notes along with all the other stuff we've talked about here. And all we do is we attach it, put a little bit of shrink wrap on it so that these won't pull apart at any point in time, and we plug them in. So the harness is now done. I know, right? So we have, to recap, we have our factory backup camera, we have our factory aux, we have our plug into the Kenwood, we have our antenna retention, and then this of course is going to give us our steering wheel controls, which leads us great into the next portion of this. Let's turn in the instruction manuals right here. Page 3. This is the default steering wheel control programming. And what this does is this tells you first off the features that the car may or may not have, and if your radio is programmed to them. This is something you want to go over and check. So you have volume up, down, check. Mode is source. Back is play, no idea what that is. Voice is mute. Answer, end, on hook, off hook. Enter is preset up. So basically what I'm getting at is for this Kenwood, this is all messed up. This doesn't make any sense. There's no reason voice should be mute. Voice should be voice. So that takes us to the next page, which is this guy here, page 4. Now on page 4, what it's going to do is give us a breakdown of all the features that are available to us and the order that they're in. On the side of the unit, there's a little tiny blue switch right here located to that piece of tape you put on, and that's what's used for programming. So we're going to get this into the car and we're going to reprogram it, which we'll walk you through, of course.
Okay, so now Dean finished the wiring harness. So now we have the backup camera, the aux, and the rest of the harness. So let's go and plug it.
Alright, so we have our radio. Now Kenwoods have these cool little pigtails hanging off the back. They're all yellow for video. And if you tape up this harness like we like to do, then you have no idea what these are going to, because they don't label them here, they label them here. So what we like to do is label them here. So for example, this is the front cam. So you just put an F, rear, put an R, and video out. Just go with a VO. Now we can go ahead and tape these up and not worry about not knowing what we're doing. Now we are doing a backup camera, so we can go ahead and take off the little rubber piece, and that'll also let us know which one we're using today. So if you're watching this video before you actually do the install and you'd like to know more about taking the dash apart, Best Kits does provide you with a manual to do that. It also shows you how to build the kit. Inside the kit comes with a pocket, just in case you were doing a single din. Now it's always good to put some form of felt down so you don't scratch the kit. This particular kit has like a matte finish to it to match the factory, so it's kind of nice. On these kits they have these guys here. This is for the pocket if you're going to use it. We're not going to be using it, so we want to just go ahead and cut it off. Now most of the time these kits have like an L or an R to tell you what's left and right. In this particular case we don't, so what we're going to do is take a look at the factory radio to make sure that these brackets match up the same way. Then we're going to take the bag of screws that it came with and screw the kit together. Remember, when screwing a kit together, always use a regular screwdriver, not a drill. This plastic is just that, plastic, and sometimes you can break it. Now I like to get these screws put in a little loose in the holes that they're going to go in, just to get it started. And then what you want to do is keep an eye on the gapping of the radio. make sure that all the gaps all line up. That's very important. You don't want the radio to get into the dash and then it be crooked. Okay, so there we go. We have the dash kit all set, radio's mounted. Let's get this bad boy in the car and finish this thing up. So we're in the car. As Fernando's already told you, he's got everything plugged in and ready to go. Now we're gonna go ahead and plug in the radio. And of course, before we put this all back together, we're gonna do two things. We're gonna test everything, make sure it works, and we're gonna reprogram the steering wheel controls. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? So how this works is you press the button, and then I'm going to say volume up, he's going to press volume up, volume down, and then things that we're going to skip, I'm going to say skip, and when I say skip, I'm going to press this button, and that's going to move it to the next feature on the list. So let's go through it. We got volume up, volume down, skip, source, skip, track up, track down, skip, 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 voice dial, on hook, off hook, and skip. Okay, now while we're doing this, there is a red light located here, and it goes green when we press the buttons, which is what we want to see. So we've gone ahead and programmed it. Now on a Kenwood, they do the silly thing on hook, off hook, which is a throwback to the old telephone days when you put the phone on the hook and take the phone off the hook. So on hook is hang up and off hook is answer. Screws with your head. Okay, so we have our radio. Let's go ahead and finish this up. Oh, come in here. All right, let's go ahead and try volume up, volume down, source. Okay, let me go to HD. Track up. Okay, track down. All right, go ahead and let me go to CarPlay. Go ahead and try VR. Let me plug the mic back in. What's the weather going to be like?
Sorry, I missed that.
One more try. What's the weather going to be like today?
Let's check the weather in Clearwater. Okay, the temperature today will range between 69 degrees and 86 degrees.
Nice day. Press it again. Call Fernando Lopez.
Calling Fernando Lopez.
Go ahead and hang up. Just press it. Alright, cool. Alright, so the buttons work. We're going to go ahead and get all this stuff tucked in the dash. One more test we need to do is reverse.
Yes. Ready?
So, yep, put your foot on the brake. Alright, we got our reverse image. Alright, cool. Go ahead and turn it off. Alright, so we've tested pretty much everything we need to test. Now it's just a matter of delicately putting all this stuff into this dash and praying that it all fits. Alright, so one last thing you want to check is disc eject. We'll go ahead and hit that. Hit disc. He just so happens to have a disc. We'll go ahead and put it in. Unit will close. Awesome. Go ahead and shut it off. Now we're going to go ahead and put all the pieces back on, and this guy is done. Grab the trim panel. Now, one funny thing about the Priuses that we've found over the years in doing these is that if you do for some reason magically start the car with this switch panel unplugged, it's going to come up on the screen, it's going to say hybrid error, which he mentioned earlier. It's not the end of the world. All you have to do is go into the back of the car where the battery is on the passenger side, disconnect the ground wire, let it sit for about 2 minutes-ish. Connect it back up, the computer in the car will re-recognize the switches and everything will work normal. We know this because we've done it.
It happens.
It happens sometimes. You know, we always try to make sure things are plugged in when we have to turn the car on, but every now and then things just don't go the way, you know.
Exactly.
There's two of us, and you know, sometimes we're kind of like trying to get stuff done and it doesn't always work out. But if you do that, it's okay. Don't stress out. No big deal.
Don't stress out.
Here, I'll hold this one and get that on.
Okay.
Now, the steps that we've showed you in this, other than, you know, being specific for a Prius, will pretty much work with any car. You go online, you find out what parts you need. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. It's okay. You know, buying from a local shop does make that easier if they have a good inventory of product like, you know, we do. We stock everything, and I understand there's not a lot of those out there. And, you know, when you do have to buy it online, like we said, take the radio out first before you go and buy the products, and make sure that you're getting the right ones. They'll look, you know, you can kind of see it'll look the way it's supposed to look. All right, so we're done. New radio in the Prius, retain the backup camera, USB, aux, steering wheel controls, reprogram them to do whatever we wanted. Life is good in that. Fernando, end the show.
Alright, so thank you for watching. You guys can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
And if you'd like to get a more intimate look at us, go ahead and check us out Monday night. We do a Facebook Live show, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, where we talk to you guys, answer your questions, and it's just a rootin' tootin' good time by all. Right?
See you later. Bye.
Have a good night. See you later. Bye.